Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to our meeting of the UDO Advisory Committee. We will get started in just a moment. We'll let everybody get in the room and get settled. And then we've still got a couple of more people in the waiting room. Dave from our staff is coming in, Dave Petton. So we'll get started in just a minute. We can get the slides for today's meeting called up on the screen as soon as we're ready for that. Here we go. Thank you. So again, welcome to the UDO Advisory Committee meeting. And we've got a couple of things to talk about today. Campus zoning districts and residential driveway standards. But before we get into the material, I'd like to, next slide, please, turn it over to our director, Allison Craig, for some greetings.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Really appreciate your participation in this group. The UDO Advisory Committee is a really important way for us to get initial feedback on things that we're either considering a change or proposing a change before we get out into the larger community and council in those kinds of discussions. So we've chosen you all because you bring a variety of different perspectives and backgrounds to the conversation, and just want to say thank you for your participation and involvement in such an important topic. I just wanted to do a brief round of introductions of city staff before I turn it back over to Alan. So first, I want to say the first person I want to give a shout out to is Monica Holmes. So many of you know Monica from the corridors work and maybe TOD work in the past. And as of this coming Saturday, Monica will now be the Deputy Planning Director for the City of Charlotte. So very exciting, and super happy to have Monica back in these conversations because she spent a lot of time with the OAC back in the day when we were doing TOD. So welcome, Monica. And then, of course, we've got Laura Harmon, who's the UDO project manager, Alan Goodwin, who's the deputy project manager for the UDO, Dave Petton, who is the division manager for the entitlement services. From the UDO team, we've got Kevin May, Sandy Montgomery, and Mariah Wozniak. I think I may have seen Andrew maybe pop up on the phone. I'm not, okay, Andrew Ossel from the UDO team as well. And then finally, Kate Marshall, who is with our communications group. So just wanted you to know the city staff that you have here on the call today. So I'm looking forward to the conversations. I'm going to come back when we talk about the driveway standards because I want to say a few words about that. But we'll first kick it off with campus, and I'll turn it back over to Alan. So again, thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Allison. Next slide, please. Just to go over the meeting procedures, it's been a little while since we've talked, but we will present the material in slide format. And as we go, if you have questions or comments, you can enter them using the chat feature of Zoom. And we will do our best to try to answer questions or comments as they come up, but if we can't get to them all, we will pause and get back to them. And so eventually we'll try to address everything that you've entered into chat. So next slide, please. Again, just to review why we're here today, we'd like to give you an overview of an upcoming text amendment on campus zoning districts. And second, we will begin a discussion of the residential driveway standards for single-family duplex, triplex, and quadruplex. But before we get into that, just a review of the text amendments that have come forth on the UDO since its adoption and since it went into effect this past June 1st. We've had 6 so far, including the latest one, which is still pending. It is you can see that of the 5 that have been acted on by City Council to date, 4 have been approved, 1 has been denied. That had to do with driveways, rather drive-throughs in centers place types. And then the last one on the table, 2023-130, is the second of the cleanup text amendments. We will have a public hearing on that text amendment on Monday night at the city council meeting. So that the vote on that is still pending. So next, we'll get into the campus zoning districts. So to start with a discussion of campus zoning districts, we should go to the campus place type. The campus place type is one of 10 place types that are mapped on the policy map. And this all comes out of the Charlotte 2040 comprehensive plan. And the goal of the campus place types is to provide for large multi-building institutions, such as educational, religious, civic, or health facilities, or a concentration of office and R&D uses. The land use, it varies depending on the type of campus. It could include office, research and development, education, medical, places of assembly, that kind of thing, as well as additional uses that are intended to support the primary use. And these may be things like residential uses in some cases, or retail, hotels or restaurants and dining, sports facilities for certain campus types, laboratories, and so forth. Next slide. Just to show you, if you're familiar at all with the place type map, or the policy map as it's called, you'll know that the various place types are mapped in different colors. The neighborhood 1 is the light buff color, which is by far the most prevalent place type across the city. But the campus place type is mapped as the teal color, not to be confused with the other greenish color, which is the parks and preserves place type. So the teal color is all of the areas that are currently mapped as a campus place type. And we'll zoom in just on the University Research Park area in the UNC campus, because that's a concentration of campus place types in the northeast portion of the city, just as a point of reference. Next slide, please. So we currently have 4 campus zoning districts that could be used in our campus place types. The IC1 is an institutional campus zoning district. It is intended for things like government campuses, educational, schools, universities, medical campuses, things like hotels, social service, continuum of care, and large religious campuses. This is typically a more suburban form of development, campus development, and that is in contrast to our next district, the IC2, institutional campus zoning districts. The uses are going to be similar to the IC1, but the form of development for IC2 is typically more urban, more compact, characterized by taller development typically than you might find in the IC1. The next campus district is our OFC, or Office Flex campus, and this is large-scale office research and medical campuses. It is also relatively low intensity in form. And our final campus district currently is our research campus, our RC district, intended for use for large-scale research campuses, and also within a mixed use environment. So you may find a number of other uses in addition to research. This is also a more urban form of development, typically with taller buildings and a more pedestrian-oriented environment. Next slide. So why are we doing a text amendment to the campus zoning districts? Well, a couple of reasons. There has been a great deal of confusion over the approach that the campus zoning districts take in our use matrix. And we'll get into exactly what that is in a slide or two. But as you know, just from a broader explanation, the use matrix in the UDO for the campus districts currently doesn't list every use that's permitted in each campus districts. Instead, the uses that you can do in each campus district are found in the use definitions for each campus type. I'll add that that does not apply to the RC, the research campus district, which does look like the other districts, but the IC1, the IC2, and the OSC districts, you're not going to see each individual use currently listed as to whether or not it's allowed in that campus district. That's the first reason we're doing an amendment. The second is that we have office uses that are not part of a mapped campus that we feel we need a new office district to cover, and we'll get a little bit deeper into that topic in a minute. So our current campus use types, we have 7 of them, and they're all mapped as a campus place type. But just to go over them and give you an example of what you might see for each of these. One is a continuum care retirement community. That is a campus place type currently. And a good example of that is Aldersgate, if you're familiar with that development. The second is an educational campus. This could be a university, could be a large high school or other type of educational facility. One example of that would be Johnson C. Smith University. The third is a government campus for typically government uses. And so a good example of that is our Charmac government campus with the government center and the courthouse and the jail and sheriff's facilities all in that campus place type. The next is a medical campus. This would be large hospital campuses such as the Atrium, Maine. The next is office campus. One example of that is a very large campus place type around the intersection of I-77 and Arrowwood Road with a number of office uses. Religious campus. This is typically not a small church or a single place of worship, but rather a larger religious campus that may include, for example, a school along with a place of worship. An example of this would be the Calvary Church down South Charlotte. And then finally, a social service campus. A good example of this is the Valerie Woodard Center on Freedom Drive, if you're familiar with that. Next slide. So as I mentioned, one reason that this is causing some confusion is that if you look in the use matrix, we list these 7 campus uses as their own use. Each of these, the campus uses that I've just covered, and you can see that for the 3 campus zoning districts, IC1, IC2, and OFC across the top of this table, this is just a small sample of the use matrix, you can see that continuum care would be allowed in the IC1 and IC2 with prescribed conditions, and educational would be allowed by right in IC1 and IC2 and so on and so forth. What you don't see currently in the use matrix are, if somebody says, can I do a restaurant in an educational campus? And I look in the use matrix for a restaurant, you're not going to find an X. So that is part of the reason that people are confused over this, and one of the things that we're going to try to tackle with this text amendment. So here's a better example of that. This is a small sample of what the current and proposed use matrix will look like, and this is found in Article 15 of the UDO, the uses article, and just a small section of the commercial uses. So you can see here that for the IC1, IC2, and OFC zoning districts across the top, you're not seeing anything next to any of these uses that are listed down the left-hand column. Even though some of these uses would be allowed in some of these campus zoning districts, you wouldn't know that. You would have to go to the use definitions for each of those campus types, and it may say, supporting uses such as a restaurant would be allowed. Now in the table, on the example on the left, you'll see that the far right column, the RC or the research campus, as I mentioned, that does kind of resemble what the other zoning districts look like. And so you'll see that there are either an X for permitted or a PC for permitted with prescribed conditions on a number of those commercial uses. If we go to the right half, the right example, this is what the use matrix would look like after the text amendment. And you can see that now, instead of all gray for the IC1, IC2, and OFC, we've got some of those uses and cells filled in with uses that would be allowed in those districts with prescribed conditions, or in some cases, uses that would be allowed by right. If you're really observant, you're going to see a new zoning district at the top, and that is the OG district. And I think we can go to the next slide and find out more about that. That's our proposed new general office zoning district. And I mentioned we feel we have a need for a new general office zoning district. And we're going to abbreviate it OG because we've got some areas that are mapped as a campus place type, but they're predominantly office in use. And one example is the aerial photo, and you may be familiar with this. This is at the very bottom of 7th Street where it turns into Monroe, and 5th Street comes in across the top. And this has got a number of office uses, including a number of medical office, but it is not associated necessarily with any particular campus type, although it may support, say, a medical campus. We have simply found that we don't have a zoning district in the UDO today that would work very well for a collection of office uses like this. And so we will be proposing in this campus text amendment a new general office zoning district. Next slide. So here's what will be proposed in this, or what is being proposed in this text amendment. Restructuring the use matrix so that it functions the same way as other zoning districts by showing which individual uses are allowed in each of the campus zoning districts. That's from a slide a couple of slides ago. We kind of went through that, what that would look like. Modify the prescribed conditions for certain uses. So we've got uses that we need prescribed conditions for if they are in a campus district, and that is typically to specify that that use must be a related component of the campus. And one example would be, let's say there is an educational campus and a restaurant may be allowed by prescribed conditions in that campus. Say it's an IC1 campus district. And it's an educational campus. Let's say it's a university. We would allow a restaurant in that district if it was related to the campus and served the campus. What we don't want is, somebody opening a restaurant that is geared toward and marketed to the general public that happen to be on that university campus. So typically we would require that it be part of the campus and not just a restaurant that is on the campus. And I'm not sure if I did a terrific job of explaining the distinction. So if you've got questions about that, we can talk about that. And then finally, as I mentioned just now, creating a new general office district. So those are the three main things that we'll be addressing with this campus text amendment. So the next steps on this are we will file this text amendment by next Friday. We'll have a follow-up meeting with this group in January, and I think we have set the date as January 18th for that next meeting. We'll talk about that. We potentially will make changes to the text amendment based on feedback. As I mentioned, we have a public hearing Monday night. We may get some feedback from that, or from council, or from community feedback, or from you guys. We will in February review the comments and feedback. and then make any additional changes if necessary and file a revised text amendment if necessary. A public hearing, and I'm sorry, I mentioned public hearing next Monday. I got my text amendments confused. Never mind that. We're not having a public hearing on this one until March, and that's a tentative. The public hearing on Monday is for a different text amendment, which I talked about earlier and confused myself. And then finally, and these last 3 days are tentative, but we think this is the schedule that we'd be on. Public hearing in March, zoning committee recommendation in April, and a final city council decision also in April. So I think that covers our discussion of the campus text amendment, and I don't see anything yet in chat. So
Alan, could I just mention, we will, once we file, be sending the text amendment out to all the members of the committee so that you'll have ample time to look at it, see if you think we have the uses right, prescribed conditions, the new district and so forth. And then be discussing at our next meeting with some questions we'll ask you guys, like, do we have the right uses? Any change with prescribed conditions? Does the OG district make sense? So forth. So you will not be asked to look at that in real time at our next meeting, but you will be given time to review it in advance.
thanks, Laura. And I don't know if we want to stop here, and I see one new comment, but stop here and take comments or wait until the end of the next piece of our presentation and then take comments and questions on everything.
Let's go ahead and stop and question any questions or comments that we have on here for campus now.
I see John Friday. Thank you, John, has asked a question in chat. If we're adding a new zoning district OG, will the table in 7.2, table 7.2, which is in the campus article of the UDO, article 7, will that change also? Yes, it will. And I don't know if anybody has any, Laura or Kevin have anything to add to that other than, yes, the campus article will incorporate the new office zoning district.
The tables. Go ahead, Kevin.
No, I was just going to hop on and say, piggybacking on what Laura said, I think when we distribute the text amendment after it's filed to this group for their review, it'll become quite clear exactly all the pieces that are touched. But certainly with Article 7 being our campus zoning district seminal article, really, with regard to the campus language, yeah, there'll be many changes through Article 7.
Thanks, Kevin, for that clarity. A couple of other comments, two of them, one from Andrea and one from Roger at BB&M Architecture, I think are the same question, and it's one I think that we are going to get. How would a campus institution be required or determined that a restaurant is serving the campus rather than the general public? All right, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think we've had discussions about that.
Yeah, and it will actually, have to be either owned by the campus or on their property, and something contractually that the zoning administrator would assess, but contractually primarily to serve. If you're talking about, say, a university, or you think about a hospital, hospitals have, restaurants all the time. They're not at the edge of the hospital property, but when they are part of the campus, they're embedded in the campus. So I think it will be somewhat of a judgment call, but hopefully still much clearer than what we have in the ordinance now. And working with the zoning administrator, and we're still kind of working through uses on this with the zoning administration team. There are certain uses that they say, like we had gas stations in there. is a use, and we're saying, well, if that is part of certain campuses, that's appropriate. And they do say, well, we make, we do that already, that these are elements of the campus. But will it always be crystal clear? Maybe not, but most of the time it should be really clear whether it's really part of the campus or the campus is selling off an out parcel so someone can build a restaurant that's unrelated.
Thank you, Laura. Carolyn asked, when will we get the information sent out to us to review? And I think you said that after our next meeting in January, we'll be sending out the text amendment. Is that
After as soon as when we file,
when we file?
we'll be getting it out so folks can look at it prior to the next meeting.
Thank you. I misheard you myself. Yeah, so
we're filing next Friday.
By the end of next week. Okay. Thank you, Nate, for the support of the approach that we're proposing in the text amendment regarding uses. And Keith Stanley asked, will there be a comprehensive list of individual uses associated with the campus types? The use matrix in the text amendment that you'll see will have all of the uses that would be permitted in each of the campus zoning districts. I don't know if I've gotten to the root of that question or not. Ethan, if you want to come off mute and maybe explain that a little bit more.
Alan, I think, and Keith, feel free to jump in. Keith, I think how I'm hearing it is, are you envisioning, will there be a comprehensive list, say, we've got the educational use type, and then under education, it might have restaurant, residential, whatever underneath that. Is that how you're envisioning that? That's your question?
Yes, ultimately, I appreciate that. I think that's Kevin. I appreciate that. For us, I think about University Research Park and understanding. I think for us, we want to make sure we're working closely with the city here to bring flexibility and understanding when we're working with developers, when we bring them to the table, that they have a full understanding on what are the permitted uses, so that way they're clear prior to moving forward on a project.
And while we may not be formatting it exactly that way, I think the information is all in that use table in a way that it could be hopefully very easily determined. So we'd be glad to talk about that further.
Okay. I don't see any other comments yet in the chat. Well,
Alan, I'm sorry. Well, and also I wanted to circle back before we go forward. Roger had his hand raised, but it had since come down, and I don't know if he had something he wanted to add or it was addressed during our conversations with what was entered in chat.
No, you're good. The question was the same question that Alan addressed. How do you determine whether it's associated with the campus? Because, I mean, it can't be land ownership because, use Chick-fil-A as an example. Even internal, very few deals will get done on simple ground leases, right? So if it's just going to be a judgment, like if that Chick-fil-A is right there on 51, on the edge of 51, and that's for the public. But if you can say, okay, well, it's buried in campus, it's really meant to be, for the campus, even though it's going to be owned by that franchisee and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. And then
Alan, there's also, can I just jump in with a related question about how would a campus institution be required to restrict access to related components, such as a restaurant, or prohibit access? They actually would not be required to do that. We wouldn't say, well, maybe not these days in hospitals, but pre-COVID, if you wanted to go eat at the hospital cafeteria, you could walk in and eat at the hospital cafeteria, even if you weren't there for hospital related use. So, I mean, whether they are restricting access to the campus and the facilities is really disconnected from the zoning ordinance. It's just that we need to make sure that really this that it is largely serving the campus, but it can also serve other people, including the community around it, if people are interested in, say, going to a restaurant on the campus, if that makes sense for that campus user.
Yeah. So hopefully that addresses Andrea's comment. All right, we can move on to the next part of our presentation, and then if you think of other questions on the campus, there will probably be time at the end of the presentation to go back and hit any questions that may arise in your minds between now and then, as well as any questions or comments you have on the driveway standards. So, Kevin,
And
if you can,
there's a second question Andrea had, and I would just say yes, if the campus chooses to make those items open to the public, like a concert hall or a botanical garden, then they could. Hopefully that helps to answer that question.
Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to turn it to Allison to make some comments and remarks about the residential driveway standards, and then Laura will pick up the discussion of driveway standards.
All right, thanks, Alan. Yeah, I just wanted to introduce this topic before we launched into it. So, as you all are aware, the introductions of duplexes and triplexes throughout all of our residential areas was a very hot topic in the comprehensive plan, as well as in the UDO. And we firmly believe that providing housing options in the form of missing middle housing is extremely important in just the housing crisis that we have in front of us, and making sure that there are both housing options as well as helping with affordable housing. Since the UDO has been adopted, become effective, we have heard some feedback that some of the standards that we put in place for duplexes and triplexes are overly restrictive in actually getting some of these built in on the ground. And I just wanted to, say, because we're going to talk about one of those today in terms of the driveway standards, that was intentional. We wanted to, and frankly, be conservative in how we introduce duplexes and triplexes, just because there were a lot of questions throughout both the comp plan and the UDO in terms of this topic. And so we put standards in place, both in terms of height as well as driveways, to ensure compatibility in terms of scale and character when these structures were introduced into existing neighborhoods. And so today we want to talk a little bit about what the driveway standards are, and kind of introduce the topic, and Laura will kind of go into that a little bit more, and just start to have a conversation about whether or not we need to make some changes. I wanted to say also real quickly that it's come to my attention that someone not on the committee has emailed some individuals that are part of the committee advocating for changes, which I really found to be inappropriate, that you all have been selected to bring a wide variety and perspectives to the conversations on anything that we're talking about with proposed changes to the UDO. This group is here, as I mentioned earlier, as when we start to want to consider changes that are not technical, that really touch policy and how the UDO is a tool for implementing our vision and values and goals of the comprehensive plan. We want to hear feedback from you about what those look like. So I just wanted to reiterate the importance of all of the opinions here in the room, and just again say thank you for participating. We're really just going to introduce this and then ask you to do some homework, and then come back and have some additional conversations about this. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Laura to kind of talk through what the standards are and what we might want to talk about considering in the future. So thanks.
Thank you, Allison. I think we're ready for the next slide. So a little bit, Allison's touched on this, but why did we add these residential driveway standards into the UDO? And first, we looked at the comprehensive plan as our kind of North Star for what we were doing. and looked at the adopted policy for neighborhood one place type. And as you can see, I won't read all of this to you, but part of what that plan says is front lawns, landscaped yards, tree-lined streets are found between the residences in the street. And you can see two pictures with different characters of neighborhoods, but both of them do have trees and lawns, particularly in our established neighborhoods between the street and the homes. And so again, with duplexes and triplexes being something that a lot of community members struggled with the comp plan and the UDO, I thought it was really important to maintain the character of our historically single-family neighborhoods while adding uses. And so the driveway standards are intended to help also maintain character to a large extent. We wanted to make sure that we preserved room for trees and that we wanted to have a pedestrian-friendly environment in our neighborhoods with sidewalks. So limitation on curb or a driveway crossing sidewalk with the driveway crossing sidewalk and so forth was also important. So for all of those reasons that we ended up with the standards that are in the UDO. If we go to the next slide, this is really what the UDO calls for. And this is, we're focused in the duplex, triplex, and quadruplex dwellings. This is in the parking standards. You can see in section 19.6 for neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2 when we're duplex, triplex, and quad. I want to also mention that we have similar standards, I believe well, actually, this would cover what is in Rio. Could be adjusted through the residential infill overlay. I think I'm getting sidewalk confused with this, so excuse me. So anyway, what are the standards that we have in the UDO? The first thing that I think has not been something we've heard feedback on is something we've had in the previous zoning ordinances is that, or something similar, garages set back a minimum of 20 feet from that back of sidewalk location so that we don't have vehicles blocking the pedestrian environment. Again, this isn't something that we've really heard about, so I won't belabor that. We've also added a minimum 10-foot width for the driveways, just so that we don't have something that is undersized. But the big item that we have heard about is the maximum cumulative width of 40% of the lot width being able to be taken up by a driveway and a parking pad associated with the driveway, up to a maximum of 24 feet. So if you really take that as far as you can, that says at 40% of the lot width, as long as you have enough width or your width works and you don't go beyond 24 feet, that 40% of your of the front area between the building and the street could be paved. Not necessarily that it all would be, maybe that some driveways folks come in and flare them out as they move further into the lot, but you are limited to that 24 feet, that 40% of the lot width up to 24 feet. And so you can see an example of that here, where you do have a duplex, and we have kind of estimated that this would be, and I'm going to ask Kevin if he can remind me, I think we said a 60-foot wide lot, and that you would, this is what you might see in a neighborhood on a 60-foot wide lot. And we have a lot of neighborhoods that do have 50 existing neighborhoods, 50, 60, 80, even up to 100-foot wide lots. So we have fairly wide lots in Charlotte, a lot of newer neighborhoods, then the lots are narrower. But if we go to the next slide, this shows you some alternatives and ways that we could look at this. And we are saying you can go to 40% of the width of your lot can have driveway and associated parking pad, up to 24-foot max. You can see that if you have a lot width of 40 feet, you'll get 16 feet to work with. If you have a lot width of 100 feet, you're over the 40%, so you're limited to 24 feet. Then if we were to say, okay, well, we're not going to limit to 24 feet anymore, we're just going to across the board say 40%. You can have 40% of your lot width for driveway and associated parking. You can see at a 40-foot wide lot width, you're 16 feet. At a 50-foot, you're 20, and so forth, up to 40 feet. And then we've shown some other examples of, say, we said half of your front area, front width, could up to 24 feet, could be driveway. And you have the numbers for that, 20 and then 24. And what if we said, we're not limiting you to 24-foot max. You can go to whatever 50% is. And then you can see how the numbers play out. And we even went up to 60%. And we wanted to give you all also some information on typical driveway widths. So you would be able to think about that as well as you're moving through this. And if we could go to the next slide. So I think just for folks to know, we have received feedback from the community or the development community, or some people in the development community, that the current standards are too restrictive. And that's why we wanted to bring that to this group and say, what do we think about these? And so if you go to the next slide, we're asking for you to do some homework between now and the next meeting. And we would like your feedback on the following questions, and we'll be sending this presentation out to you. Should the 24-foot maximum cumulative driveway width, what we've been talking about, be revised or eliminated? Should the cumulative driveway width of 40% of the lot width be increased? Should we be applying this to single family as well? Because there have been examples that have been brought to our attention where basically the entire front yard of a single family home has been paved for parking. So we apply this now to duplexes, triplexes, and quadruplexes. Should we look at applying this to single family dwellings? And then finally, should we have the same driveway standards for all contexts? So we have contexts where there are established neighborhoods, which we're really kind of considering, a lot within an established neighborhood that has a certain character. Should that be the standard be different for new development where there isn't an established character already? And so these are some of the things we would like you guys to think about in the next month. So we are asking you to take this information, look at the ordinance. Please reach out to us if you have any questions. I know that we work in this every day, but some folks may not. So we'd be glad to kind of help you understand this concept further. If you'd like, take a look at existing neighborhoods, whether old or new. try to visualize what potential changes to the driveway standards would look like in these areas and whether you think that's good or not. And we'll come back in January to discuss the questions that we posed on the previous slide. And I think at this point, I'm not, let me go backwards in chat to make sure I haven't missed anything. I think I have. Okay. So first, Matt Langston said it's worthwhile to note that drive aprons for driveways close to one another may be combined into one curb cut. I believe that's a statement, Matt?
No, it's just a question. I mean, the graphic that you showed had two driveways, you know, within a few feet of one another. And I don't know if it's worth elaborating on that in the ordinance or not, but just I
Okay.
think rather than having like an intermediate curb island poking out into the gutter line, just make one simple curb cut that then splits into two driveways.
Okay.
Just a question.
Yeah, and I think questions at this point are great. And, you know, we're really looking at for the feedback next month.
We had
It's
John's question in chat, and then we've got several people lined up with their hands.
Sure. So is the width limit only for the first 20-foot depth? And then it as written now, it is for, well, as in the text amendment going to hearing on Monday, it's for the entire area between the home and the street, not just the 20 feet. And that is an adjustment to be, we found folks were getting extremely creative in their design, and we thought was not consistent with the original intent. So it would be for that entire area. And I'm just going to go in the order of people I see on the screen.
I've got you. Nate's up next and Julie's on deck. Nate.
Yeah, thanks. I had two questions. So single-family detached homes are allowed, I'm blanking on what it's called, to do a horseshoe driveway with two curb cuts on their property in the UDO.
As written now, yes.
Which is, from what the intent and goals were of the driveway standards, probably a worse condition than the current triplex, duplex, and quadruplex standards. And then you don't have to answer it today, but a question, hearing your explanation of what the intent and goals are of driveway regulations, and back to John's question, I still don't understand why regulating what happens beyond the public realm streetscape or established setback matters to the city or staff with the way you highlighted at the beginning. So some more explanation on that would be helpful, meaning that one driveway splits into two outside of the public realm. Because it would be good for you to highlight that change that you've made in the text amendment for this group, because that is a change that's occurring.
And I'll just say, if you look at the context of most single family homes, I'm not going to say every one of them, but of the character of our neighborhoods, that is not happening with driveways on most single family lots. And that's why we thought that was important. I mean, we may not all agree, but it's just
but there's a lot of double driveways with turnarounds on single family lots.
There's some, but yeah, that's why we want people to look at their neighborhoods. I could tell you my perspective from my neighborhood, but we've got folks here from lots of different neighborhoods in Charlotte, and yeah, we really want to hear the kind of the different perspectives, or maybe everyone comes back with the same perspective.
Julie, you want to jump in here? Roger, you're going to be on deck.
Sure. So I did get an email regarding this driveway ordinance and what's basically allowed by state statute and all of that. So I don't know if everybody else got that and how that really affects what we're talking about here. But Laura, I can certainly, as you know, we are doing duplexes in the Druid Hills neighborhood on smaller lots. And I don't think we've had any real issues with what the ordinance is right now, but I will definitely check with staff.
That'd be great. I would say that there are different opinions on the state statute, and leave it at that for now. We'll probably be circling back with our internal attorney.
I have a question. Hi, sorry, this is Angela Ambraz. Are we having, I know that we're having this discussion, are we having a lot of, I know you said a lot of builder developers sort of, are they complaining about this ordinance? Is that sort of the main thing of why we're revisiting it?
Yes, we have had some folks that have said they're unhappy, that they believe it's overly restrictive.
Okay, I just want to make sure I had the right.
I'm not sure that, we've just heard from a small number of people. There may be a lot more out there that feel it that way. There may not.
Well, I think
let's bring this forward and have the discussion with this group that represents a wide range of perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what it boils down to is the way it's written today. If you're trying to do a triplex by right, you cannot have enough driveways on the front of the building to front load a triplex. And if you're doing a duplex, you essentially can only have one car garages. And I think that's sort of the core pushback that the builders are grappling with, because sometimes they want duplexes that are larger units that it would have a 2-car garage. And admittedly, if you have 2 duplexes with 2-car garages, it's kind of like a 4-car garage. But the way the formula is built currently, you can't construct that way. So that's sort of what it boils down to.
And Matt, I hope you're okay with me adding that you can't construct that between the residence and the street. If you wanted to construct that, you'd have to put that in the rear.
Right.
I could see how that can be a challenge, especially if our partnering goal was to, try to utilize the single family lot to try to get a triplex or a potential quad if you were doing an affordable unit that's there. And if that could sort of be hindering that goal, then I agree that we should be evaluating how to make it more amenable to what the overall goal is.
Yeah, and that's what we'd like, so that everyone has a chance. We know that some folks aren't here today. Everyone to take a look at it and bring different perspectives to the call next month.
The very patient Mr. Roger Manley, with your hand, please, sir. And then we've got a comment from Andrea in the chat next.
My hand was getting tired. Just two items here. Kind of one just really process related. I'm thinking forward to this January meeting. And we're all on the campus stuff and this, I think we're all going to go out and think about it, do a little research. What I'm thinking about is kind of how the next meeting is going to run. If there's a lot of kind of feedback that's going to come. I almost wonder if if just me personally, if I kind of do a little research, come up with something, is there a way to kind of shoot it out to the group beforehand so everyone can kind of digest all these, information or opinions? So when the next meeting comes, it's, we've all already kind of shared, and then it can be more discussion. Is that kind of, I'm thinking about how this next meeting is going to go, kind of process wise.
And you're right, it could be a lot of content. Let us, Roger, I think that's a good point. Kind of think about how we could do that in a way that doesn't just all of a sudden become people getting their inboxes full, but maybe we could look at a way to do that.
Right.
Kind of in a
But
controlled manner.
And the second is really, Laura, to you and Kevin and staff, because this is all revolving around character, right? Maintaining character, or even in the new neighborhoods, creating a character that we think is, beneficial to kind of the fabric of the city. I'd really like to understand from you guys a little bit more about what you see as the character that we're trying to preserve or create.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to even what the comp plan said, is our neighborhood 1 districts. And I think what people see are the front lawns. And yes, I have one house out of, sorry, Nate, I'm going to say one house out of 25 on my street that has a horseshoe with the lawn. But, typically, and other streets may have more, typically that's what people are seeing in our N1, the areas that have been classified as N1. And so I'll just say where we started with this and going back and looking at that language that specifically talks about that for N1 is how much pavement can we allow before it starts, at least my perspective, before it starts to change that character of the front lawns for that green space along our streets for that semi-public space.
And how so you guys are considering that kind of critical green space to run all the way from the sidewalk to the structure, not like a certain distance, right?
I think so, because you can, as you're in a neighborhood, you can see the structure. If we have a setback line or whatever, you can't see that line. And so that's the way we looked at it. Again, we're bringing that to this group. There may be something none of us have thought about that we come up with at the end of this. There may be different standards for different places. We might wholesale do something totally different, or, we are open to looking at it in different ways. And we just know it's a balancing act.
Thanks.
Kevin?
Yeah, Laura, we had if you're looking at your chat, we've got a question from Andrea at 1222. And then Carolyn, you'll be up next.
Yeah, I think that while driveway requirements, can be related to some of particularly what's in stormwater as far as limitations, that's just part of the design exercise. I'm not sure that they're related. It's not something that we would test in the ordinance. I think there are opportunities to maintain pervious area and different ways to do that, and we didn't want to direct that too much.
Hi, it's Andrea. I guess my thinking that led to that question was, if we're talking about expanding what's currently allowable, and there are certainly different topographical considerations for different developments, different lots. And if we're considering expanding the driveway area, does it still fit within the other regulations? Are we making a promise that couldn't be kept and causing more confusion for a developer? Or how would this be considered if you were to expand the percentages?
They would still have to meet the other regulations. I don't think that they're in conflict. And if anyone does think that it, we've got some folks who do the site design all the time. I'm going to reach out to them. call a friend on this one. But I think that if for some reason they got enough pavement that started to hit up against those other standards, and they would have to add more green space in some way to the site.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Carolyn,
Thank you. Thank you all. I'm glad we're getting into this deeper. I happen to live in one of the older neighborhoods in Charlotte, and I think we need to balance this out for the intent of the UDO and the 2040 plan with the character and for environmentally. When you're talking about adding triplexes and that sort of thing, even if you have a 1-car garage, 2-car garages, as I drive around some of the newer neighborhoods or where they're infilling these triplexes, I'm seeing 2, 3, 4 cars parked in the driveways, in the shorter driveways, and now they're impeding the sidewalks, and they're parking up in the planting strips in between the sidewalks. So realistically, looking at the quality of life, and then when you're parking on older residential streets because they can't fit in the sidewalk, in the driveways, now you can't get fire trucks down the streets, you can't get ambulances down the street. So I just hope everybody will look at the realistic part of everyday life, and especially like our older neighborhoods. So there's a lot to look at in this, and especially, talk about character, definitely, but just your realistic everyday life in some of these neighborhoods. So thank you. I look forward to further discussions on this.
Thank you.
Lord, and then John Friday put in the chat, and he's really just a process question.
Yeah, and I'll admit I don't want to say anything without our staff team talking about this, but that's what I'm thinking of, that we have a series of questions that everyone answers by a certain date that wants to put something in writing. We consolidate for each question with the person. So I think, John, that's probably a really good approach. Which means we need to get this out to folks as quickly as we can.
Just a comment on the last comment. We've had that issue, which may speak to flexibility here, is that if I just put like a 1-car garage with a straight driveway on one of my duplexes, sometimes what we have are people parking in their yard, which is not the look we want for our neighborhoods either. So, or
up to code.
They make their own gravel parking pad, which drives us absolutely crazy. So at the same time that we're talking about this, how people actually live does need to be taken care, into consideration. We've just had that issue before. And we've even volunteered to pave parts of people's yards so that they can actually have someplace to park, because goodness, please don't park on the grass.
Kevin,
Yeah, I think we're caught up. We had a follow-up comment from Andrea, really just kind of echoing and agreeing with, I think, Carolyn's comments and her observations. And from that, we're good to go.
any final comments? Allison, anything you want to add?
No, I just want to say thanks for the feedback. I figured the sort of touching on the duplex and triplex thing we'd get some great discussion. So I appreciate that. And I mean, and it's complicated, like Laura was saying, and a balancing act in that, I mean, we do need housing in the city of Charlotte. That is a fundamental problem that we unfortunately share with many other cities. And so we're trying to find a balance between making accommodations for more housing while also not creating burdens on existing neighborhoods. So look forward to hearing your feedback. And I was chatting with Monica, and I think some of the folks from the urban design team may be able to create some visualizations, because I think like I'm a very visual person, so it's hard for me to look at dimensional criteria and understand, well, is 40, 50, 60 enough. And so maybe creating some actual pictures for you to react to would also help in the conversation. So we'll work on that as well.
Thank you, Allison. I just want to thank everyone for being here today. I know it's a busy time of the year for most folks, and we look forward to seeing you on the 18th of January 2024. Have a great rest of the day.
Happy holidays.
Bye now.
Same to everybody.